Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Akeziel here, and I'll be continuing my reaction to Homunculus Covens of the Dark Eldar by Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer. And once again, and I highly recommend Baldermort's content, and if you aren't already checking him out, you should definitely do so. Oh, the first half was a treat to listen to, and I'm sure the rest of it will be as well. And as always, a link to the original video will be in the description box below. But without further ado, let's continue. I just realized that rhymed.
Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces and factions of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, on All Hallows Eve, or Halloween as most say, I felt it might be a piece of macabre fun to finally discuss the Drukhari, the Eladris Ineas, the Dark Eldar. For make no mistake, despite how terrible the servants of the Dark Gods of Chaos may be, no matter how brutal and unforgiving the Marines may be, how insatiable and ravenous the Great Devourer may be, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, as evil as the Dark Eldar in all of the setting.
I would agree with that, yes, because it's like in some ways, Chaos, for example, you could argue that the Chaos Gods are kind of like animals in a sense, just seeking to propagate and feed. Granted, they cause immense suffering in the process of doing so, but a big part of it is just their nature because of what they are, and not active malicious intent and sadism. Although I'm sure there's some sadism in there when it comes to Slanesh.
All who know of them despise them, hate them with a passion that cannot be matched, for they truly are the most terrible of enemies, the most vile of adversaries. Better to swallow your own tongue or tear out your own throat with your bare hands than to fall into the clutches of the Dark Eldar. And please be aware that the Covenants, the HAEMONCULI, are only one of multiple stains. Strains we shall get into at another time. Now, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, from the labyrinthine darkness of Komorah, the homunculus covens emerge into real space. Theirs is a world of sinister delight and depthless pain, for they feed on agony as a leech feeds on blood. When the monstrous armies created by these demented flesh sculptors are released upon the galaxy, whole worlds are plunged screaming into madness. The denizens of the Dark City are fathomless evil personified. Some were old even before the fall of the Eldar, wizened creatures that have engineered the death of sons, just as they have given life to thousands of monstrous forms. Many of their number are the selfsame hedonists that led the ancient Eldar Empire to utter catastrophe. Yet, they regret not a single moment of their depraved existences. So steeped are these homunculi in matters arcane, that they see even death as no more than an interesting curio.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, they are actually aren't they pretty much the only members of the old aristocracy that from before the fall that still remain, since Vect's power play that allowed Space Marines to get into Kamara and kill off the at the time ruling elite so that he could gain power, were got rid of pretty much all of them that weren't homunculi.
To them, The multitudinous races of the galaxy are mere fodder for their enjoyment. The homunculi do not work alone. Concepts such as manual labor or any kind of exertion come to that are distasteful to them in the extreme. Instead, they wreak their evil deeds through the masked minions and pallid servants that form the bulk of each homunculus coven. The most common of these slave castes are the groveling racks and the lumbering grotesques, flesh-crafted covenites that visit terrible acts of violence upon the armies of the lesser races. The most fearsome of a coven's creations are its engines of pain, biochemical nightmares that tear apart the bodies and even the souls of the warriors that defend real space. To cross a homunculus is to bring evil to your door, and perhaps even doom an entire planet to a grisly demise.
Ah, yes, because not only do the homunculi they have quite a special touch when it comes to their craft, but I know about some of the things that for example, the Talos is capable of, and its variants.
Lords of Pain. The homunculi are the depraved surgeon alchemists of the Dark Eldar. Ruling over covens deep in the undercity of Cormora, these withered fiends ply their wicked trade on captive prisoners and eager donors alike. Theirs is an unspeakable craft. Yet without the malignant genius of these diabolical fiends, the Dark City would soon devour itself. The homunculi are masters of torture, flesh distortion, and poisonous malice. They are true connoisseurs of pain, utterly dedicated to their craft. As masters of regenerative techniques, they hold the power of life and death over their Cormorite kin, handing out a sham immortality to those who court their favor. The strange science of the homunculi allows them to regenerate a fallen client from even the most ruined remains, essentially bringing him back to life in exchange for a portion of his soul. The Coven Lords are just as happy to dabble in the cosmetic as well as the metaphysical. A Dark Eldar who seeks their expertise will be slowly and agonizingly reshaped with new appendages or sinister bodily enhancements. Many homunculi also brew deadly filters and poisons for their Cormorite brethren.
Oh yeah, an example of some of the people that the homunculi work on and alter their bodies would be the Scourge, who may get feathers and talons and wings grafted onto their bodies. They can become more bird-like.
Usually distilled to a truly extreme concentration. Their specific request is not always adhered to, for the Lords of Pain believe that they always know best, whether within the Dark City or without. The majority of homunculi do not exist in isolation, but instead form into like-minded bands as covens. Each horror aesthete revels in expanding his coven's knowledge of pain by perfecting nefarious sciences and mastering the visceral arts. Covens can vary in size, from small, elitist coteries of homunculi to huge torture conclaves that boast several thousand minions at the least. Every homunculus considers himself akin to a god, and hence surrounds himself with a retinue of freakish acolytes that obey his every whim without hesitation. Many do not care to debase themselves by touching the ground, let alone sully themselves with physical labor. To this end, they are assisted at all times by esoteric technologies and an entourage of abominations.
Oh, so I was right about that little personal anti-grav of engine thing.
Megalomaniacs all, their egos require the constant obeisance of subservient beings, most of whom they have fashioned themselves. These servants ensure the Coven's captives are hauled about, flayed, or dissected according to their master's will. It is amid the stalactite-like citadels deep under Cormora that the homunculi make their lairs. The Covens themselves are now impossible for the unwelcome to visit, to locate, and each is laced from end to end with deadly traps and sanity-blasting sights. In the heart of each Coven's underspire, pitch-black oubliettes and vaulted flesh laboratories jostle together in great number. Racks of alchemical vials are held by webworks of sinew, the vessels upon them shimmering translucent in the gloom or wobbling as their contents shift within. Sinister apparatus loops down upon barbed chains.
It also occurs to me, I wonder if the homunculus, or rather homunculi, in Warhammer 40k were inspired by the Clansmeetsy vampires from World of Darkness, actually.
Waiting to activate at its creator's command. At the fringes of these cavernite underspires are the glistening breeding walls where, inside row upon row of amniotic tubes, new dark Eldar are incubated and messily birthed. Just as the homunculi oversee the birth of most dark Eldar, they also cater for them after death. At each coven's heart are the pain slabs upon which the homunculi practice their evil craft.
Actually, being reminded of how the Dark Eldar, because, carrying a child to term safely is a sign of prestige within the Dark Eldar, and not because the pregnancy is overly taxing on the body, but because being pregnant is a period of weakness in a society where everyone backstabs each other, whether just for fun or to attain rank. Like the fact that they use those birthing chambers to create new Dark Eldar, kind of similar to the Vita wombs that the Imperium uses, but I assume far more advanced.
The scream.
Yeah, because of that, I actually kind of had the funny thought of some Kabbalite warrior calling the homunculus as that tended to them in the birthing chamber by some moniker that would normally be associated with parental affection. If the Dark Eldar had any capacity to actually feel love for anyone other than themselves, I assume.
Screams of their victims do not only invigorate the homunculi, but also their clients. Ranged above each slab in concentric circles of crystal-fronted sarcophagi are the mortal remains of those who have entered into regenerative pacts. Each client nourished back to life by the agonies radiating upwards from the slab. Over the millennia, the most ancient homunculi have been exceptionally obscured in their perversions. They seek ever more bizarre and exotic ways to draw out the agonies of their victims. For as the eons slide by, their hunger for anguish becomes increasingly difficult to quench. Some of the most diabolical factions, such as the Altered, may depopulate entire colonies in order to produce a toxin of the right consistency. Others, like the Hex, treat their real space raids as monstrous art exhibitions, thriving on flamboyant displays of carnage. The homunculi are always seeking new ways to inflict horror upon the denizens of real space. Certain covens, such as the Children of Bone, specialize in developing skeletal thin grotesques to aid them upon the battlefield, while the Coven of the Ebon Sting are famed for their especially venomous engines of pain. It is these hideous horrors, or monstrous constructs, that do the majority of the killing when the Coven mounts a raid. Having lived for thousands of years, the Lords of Pain look upon the quotidian, planet-wrecking wars of lesser races with a snickering amusement. Yet as the 41st millennium draws to a tumultuous close, the covens of the homunculi launch larger raiding parties than ever, reveling in and gleefully adding to the confusion and carnage of this dark age.
Ah yes, because the Dark Eldar are opportunists who, similar to the Night Lords, primarily target undefended civilians, and it's because they want as little opposition as possible. Which makes sense considering that they're usually there for slaves. But still.
The Theatre of Horrors. When a homunculus coven gathers its might and descends upon the worlds of real space, It brings with it all the horrors of the dark realms beneath Cormorah. Terrible creations burst from shimmering webway portals to slaughter and pillage, claiming their screaming bounty before disappearing as suddenly as they came. Dark Eldar society is built upon the suffering of others. The survival of this ancient and murderous race requires a regular influx of luckless screaming captives. Thankfully for the Cormorites, the galaxy has such unwilling prisoners in plentiful supply. It is for this reason that the Dark Eldar make regular ventures into real space, yet it is rare for each Cormorite faction to have the same agenda. The Archons of the Cabals make bold, swift strikes in order to capture vast hosts of slaves and further their power base within Cormorah. The witch cults of the arenas launch raids to bring back the elite warriors of the lesser races, worthy playthings for their nightly blood sports. But when the covens of the homunculi burst out of the webway, they do so with more monstrous and esoteric goals. The most common objective of the coven raids is to obtain specimens for the purposes of experimentation within the homunculi's dungeon lairs. By ensuring their slabs are never empty, the coven lords not only fulfill their own strange needs, but also supply pain enough to restore their clients in their sarcophagi. Some homunculi will be incredibly discerning about what specimens they bring back, selecting their victims on bizarre criteria such as age, eye color, pitch of voice, cruelty of spirit, or a myriad other incomprehensible peccadilloes. Others will simply depopulate entire settlements, or even continents, harvesting raw materials to be sorted and categorized properly upon return to their lairs. Perhaps the infected lungs of a Forge World's defenders are a pleasing color when rendered down, or the gizzards of greenskins from an ice planet are of the perfect tensile strength for tendon webbing. The homunculus Croniarch Sek is much envied by his rivals for his artisanal workbenches, which are crafted from the colossal oesophagi of the now extinct Vengoliath race. Indeed, none can fathom the twisted motives of these ancient deviants.
I wonder if the extinction could be solely attributed to the homunculi hunting them to make workbenches out of their oesophagi, or if that was just a contributor to the downfall, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was the former case, to be honest.
For their whims are beyond the grasp of sane minds. Raids are not always focused on acts of theft or abduction. Certain homunculi, such as the prophets of flesh, revel in the creation of meaningful and intricate patterns of corpses to be admired from the depths of space. Excursions from Cormorah may also allow the opportunity for a long-standing grudge to be transformed into a poetic punishment. When Archon Vaxil once made a disparaging comment about the quality of the poison purchased from Karyok of the Ever Spiral, the homunculus offered to enhance the potency of Vaxil's splinter weaponry 7 times over by way of recompense. He lived up to his promise. When Vaxil's Cabalites raided the Imperial planet of Fool's Hope, their splinter weapons fired toxins so potent they became airborne, and turned not only the Imperial defenders to primordial sludge, but Vaxil and his Cabalite raiders too.
I had a feeling that they would do this, is by saying that the toxin wasn't potent enough, they have insulted a homunculi's craft. And considering that they think that they know better than everyone else, I was not expecting them to take kindly to that.
In comparison to other Dark Eldar, the homunculi take an almost languid approach to waging their campaigns of terror. These dark fiends are unearthly creatures, some a dozen millennia old, and time is of little relevance to them. Masters of eon-spanning ambition, the homunculi plan their real space raids with the precision of a master surgeon. Specifically equipped engines of pain may need to be crafted for the final denouement, or certain allegiances formed with other factions of the Dark City in order to overcome a planet's specific defenses. As the time draws near to step onto the stage of war, there is an air of excited competition within the Coven, each of its perverse lords making ready to bring his own dark performance to life. Through hidden webway portals, these ancient beings and their sinewy horrors make their entrance, A plant's boneyards, eerie forests, or long-abandoned manufactorums are favoured locales from which to begin their operations. As patient as spiders, the homunculi may bid their abominations whittle away at a plant's defenders little by little, spending days or weeks spreading terror and confusion before the main assault. Alternatively, they may make an outrageous spectacle of their arrival, glorying in the bizarre and hideous sight they present to their victims.
Yeah, just imagine being, a factory worker in a hive city, similar to the guy who was tortured in the first half of the video to regenerate all those dark Eldar that were in the sarcophagi up above. And it's like you personally don't know about all these, Xeno stuff. You just work your factory job and that's it. And then all these grotesque horrors start showing up such as the Rex and grotesques with their multiple arms and all this strange looking stuff all over them, and the poisons they use. Some of which, by the way, like the Dark Eldar, or have been known to use some toxins that kill people in rather creative ways. Like just simply poisoning someone isn't enough. How about giving them a poison that causes them to grow so quickly that their skin splits open? Stuff like that.
It is the racks and grotesques that bring the full force of their master's flair for bloodshed to the front lines. With monstrous surgical implements, these masked horrors rip open torsos and tear through bone or armor, their liquefier guns burning through enemy squads with gouts of hyper-distilled vitriol. Engines of pain hover across the battlefield, sent into the ranks of the foe by the dismissive gestures of their creators. The weapons of these constructs are myriad.
Also, I find it quite fitting that the toxic cocktail was referred to as vitriol, considering that these guys are in a way similar to alchemists, because back in ye olden days, certain chemical elements were referred to as different types of vitriol.
From lances of searing energy and webs of barbed chains, to boiling ichor, flickering needles, and monstrous siphons that drain the life force from their victims. The spoils of agony they reap are then shared with their depraved creators, who steal the lives of their foe with a gourmet delicacy that is unsettling in itself. Most homunculi take great pride in their discernment when it comes to their selection of victims. When they are not gifting an excruciating demise to those who stray into their path, these diabolical figures can be seen prodding the skin of captives or probing the stress points of skulls. Some will taste a dribble of a victim's blood upon the tips of their fingers, working it upon their tongues like true connoisseurs. Others view such direct interaction as sullying themselves, and have their monstrous bodyguards open up innards for scrutiny according to their every whim. Once the battlefield bacchanal has reached its end, the homunculi will return to Cormorant with a fresh collection of captives. Even the most nonchalant homunculus will be privately exhilarated by the potential of his haul. There is no guessing what the grim gourmands will actually do to their unfortunate trophies. Living victims are forced into the dungeon lairs, where a new life of anguish will begin.
And with how particular they can be about what they do to enjoy themselves, I imagine that, while absolutely horrifying, that what the homunculi do to people will always be very creative.
Lesser specimens may be disassembled, and perhaps, while still breathing, melded as decorations into the wall of a coven stronghold. Captives may be released through labyrinths, so that their hope of freedom spawns more appetizing endorphins, only to be hunted down once more by sinister horror engines. All captives are seen as mere fodder, be they the mightiest space marine or the lowliest Gretchen. After all, there are always more victims to be taken from real space, more specimens to be examined upon the slab. As long as life abounds in real space, these dark displays will never cease. To kill a monster, provided at least some of their bodily remains make it back to Cormorant, all Dark Eldar can be regrown in the shadowed dungeons of the Coven Lords. So vain and self-centered are the Cormorites that, even after death, a portion of a soul clings to their cadaver, a silver thread that their wandering spirit can trace to their regenerating physical shell.
Oh, so that's how it works. By just sheer pride and vanity, a portion of their soul will just sticks there.
This thread can be cut, however, and fades to nothingness unless properly reinforced. It is because of this that the Dark Eldar raid real space at breakneck pace, recover their fallen, and return home before their dead are robbed of a chance at resurrection. The homunculi of the Dark City are able to transcend death entirely. By means of their twisted soul science, they often have a small part of their existence in rune-carved caskets, an
Oh look, it's the Yanari.
extra-dimensional pockets, so even should their corporeal form be vaporized, they can inhabit new flesh. For a homunculus to be truly extinguished, he must be utterly destroyed, both corporeally and spiritually. It is perhaps no surprise that the experts in killing homunculi are the Coven Lords themselves, for the Dark City's treachery affects even these ancient terrors. Hundreds of arcane schemes and artifacts have claimed the lives of homunculi over the eons, ranging from the fabled Obliterator to the soul-killing Nihil Stone. Needless to say, the homunculi are not above turning such devices against mortal prey, much to the despair of those who face them. Covens of Cormorant. The underworld of the Dark City is a near-endless labyrinth of shadows that plays host to covens beyond counting. Yet even amongst this loose brotherhood of torturers and twisted servants, there are some covens whose infamy is so great their names are feared throughout Cormorant and beyond. The Black Descent. The homunculi of the Black Descent love to lay traps and sit back to enjoy their lethal denouement. These range from the feigned flights and baited ambushes of their real space raids to 1,000-year intrigues that see their rivals fully humbled.
That sounds very Zinchian. I love it.
To cross the Dark Descent is to invite a punishment darkly twisted to fit the crime. One who uses brute force against them may later find themselves stung by an insect-sized rack, the hyperadrenaline introduced into his bloodstream forcing him into a frenzy so severe he literally tears himself apart. One who delays payment for the Black Descent's poisons may awake one morning trapped in a slith venom nest. Even unintended offences can yield retribution. When an ambassador from the cabal of the baleful gaze wrinkled his nose at the stench of the Coven's dungeons, he soon found himself coughing on transmutative gas. Later that night, he spouted the quivering nostrils of an Ur-ghoul, his eyes sealing over so he could better appreciate the fine bouquet of rot. The homunculi of the Black Descent have constructed a pyramid labyrinth of glass that hangs inverted beneath the Dark City. Promising captives are thrown into the labyrinth's sensory deprivation chambers, whilst the Covenites leer outside. The only way out is to negotiate the maze's trap-strewn confines through touch and instinct. Almost all of those that undertook this journey are killed, caught in paradox cubes, or falling eternally into Mobius pits as they try to avoid the labyrinth's bladed convolutions. Those that pass through safely are rewarded with a new life as a rack, becoming a part of the Coven forevermore.
So the people who actually manage to make it through these labyrinths of horror, or who I imagine that there aren't very many, in the sense that, well, it definitely sounds like it'd be very difficult to get through. So I imagine that they have that in order to produce large numbers of racks, they need massive numbers of captives to run through this gauntlet. I expect maybe like a 1% survival rate out of this.
The Dark Creed. Specializing in the arts of terror, the homunculi of the Dark Creed have a deep reverence for the indirect kill. They love nothing more than seeing their victims debase themselves in fear, and will drive their captives to madness or suicide purely to show that they are above such primitive notions as physical intervention. Having long grown bored of traditional murder techniques, the Dark Creed believe it is the height of sophistication to end a victim's life without making a direct attack. An abstract death, perhaps caused purely through heart-stopping emotion, is considered the finest victory. Aside from any aesthetic considerations, such a demise has the practical benefit of being difficult to trace. Even their racks prefer the esoteric kill. Each cell boasts at least one liquefier gun, artefactor or hex rifle from which to slay their targets from a distance, where their death throes can be enjoyed by all. It is because of their preference for unusual deaths that the Coven has a great many cross-parasite engines in its number. Strung with blood chains and grisly trophies, these constructs generate so much negative energy that they can kill without striking a single physical blow. Likewise, the Dark Creed's forces are often joined in battle by the night-clad denizens of ELDAR, for that realm too thrives on the weaponization of fear. During their real space raids, the Coven is often accompanied by packs of mandrakes that hurl soul-blistering balefire to terrorize their victims before the homunculi close in for an elaborate kill. The Hex. The homunculi of the Hex consider themselves to be the preeminent artists of flesh, with the entirety of real space as their canvas. To construct truly impressive works, they employ large cells of racks and grotesques, mind-bound in much the same manner as hive organisms, so they can be better suited to enact their master's artistic vision. Ever since their creation in the dark days that followed the Fall, the Coven has specialized in the fabrication of curses. Most of these are the product of baleful technologies, the effects of which have been refined to the point where, in the eyes of the primitive races, they are indistinguishable from magic. However, some of the Coven's favorite curses truly border on the supernatural. It was the Hex that harnessed Plague of Glass in 926, Millennium 36, their discoveries leading to the invention of the rifle that bears their name to this day. It was the homunculi of the Hex that refined the macrosteroidal effects of a stolen bone virus to create the ossifactor, a weapon favored by the aquathists of their employ. They were even responsible for the creation of the fabled Orbs of Despair, heavy black spheres so saturated with raw negativity that they can reduce a grown man to a gibbering wreck in a heartbeat.
So it's that last one sounds like someone took the terror effects grenades and just dialed them up to 11.
The glee with which the Hex unleashed their carefully cultivated curses upon an unsuspecting universe is palpable in its intensity, and the homunculi's thin lips curl back over their sharpened teeth as they drink in each fresh nightmare. However, the unbridled use of curses leaves its mark on the wielder as well as the victim. Those that deal with the Coven's most arcane weapons are often pale to the point of albinism, covered with ink-blot discoloration, or possessed of a slight greenish pallor. Regardless of form, the servants of the Hex are always unsettling, their leers somehow obvious even behind their masks. The Coven of 12. The Coven of 12 is a conclave of several homunculi, each of whom considers themselves the foremost practitioner of the dark arts. Membership of the Coven is restricted to just 11 individuals at any time. The 12th spot is left open for Urian Rakath, should he ever deign to accept the Coven's invitation.
Oh, that's why.
Since homunculi have a habit of overcoming death, the only way that a new aspirant can ascend to join the 12 is to dispose of a current incumbent in a manner so thorough that even a master homunculus cannot undo it. Shegmeth Crow was pushed into a mirror dimension the size of a coffin, too small for his frame. Cabris Zulfa was posed an impossible riddle that, with each wrong answer, turned more of his body into bone until finally he was nothing more than an osseous statue. Zacrodivia was rendered into a sentient soup using acids from captured tyranids, then imbibed by his peers at a banquet.
It turned into a sentient and sludge. So he was still aware of what was going on. That's impressive.
A warped arms race consumes the Coven of 12. Their quest to stay one step ahead of each other ensures each homunculi bear the deadliest devices their arcane science can yield. These tools of atrocity feature strongly in the arsenals of the Coven during their real space raids. Flesh gauntlets, electroconvulsive whips, null batons, mind phase gauntlets, and even stronger weapons abound. Many of the Coven's members are Scarlet Epicureans, their taste for inventive fatalities so all-consuming they seek to experience them in person. Many of the racks in the service of the 12 are flayed of their skin, their nerves left raw so they can appreciate the full spectrum of sensation. Disciplines of...
So every waking moment is agony. Every breeze against their skin sets alight bare receptors. I can only imagine that some masochist would say how exquisite the pain is.
Of the homunculi. The homunculi are not immune to the fashions and fads of the Dark City. Where one Covenite might specialize in flesh crafting, another might become an expert in cultivating fear, and yet another may strive to master death itself. Despite their differences, there exist informal schools of thought that have thrived amongst them for millennia. The dark pursuits of the homunculi help them stave off the ennui that haunts all those freed of time's grip. Sometimes known as disciplines, these practices allow the Covenites to focus their capricious attentions on a body of study long enough to become a master. The concept is not dissimilar to that of the Eldar path, though where the craft worlders follow a single strand of experience through fear of falling prey to excess, the homunculi do so in order to better secure their power over the mortal realm. To them, rules and restrictions are for cowardly children. The homunculi would never admit that they are bound to their fields of expertise any more than they would concede that they may have chosen the wrong course during the fall of the Eldar. Should a homunculus tire of a certain body of work, or become known by his peers as unfashionably predictable, he will switch focus without hesitation. It does not do to belittle the scope of a Coven Lord's studies, for such an incautious soul risks experiencing the full extent of that homunculus's diverse talents. Despite the diversity of a Coven's chosen studies, certain pursuits recur.
Just like the other people who, in some way, ended up insulting a homunculus with this, such as the case of the poison earlier. They're saying it wasn't potent enough, only to end up getting a version that was so potent, and that it also became airborne and after use to kill the wielders as well.
Across the ages. It is common enough for those aggregating to similar schools of thought. Their adherents are as likely to collaborate in ever more elaborate real space exhibitions as they are to strive to outdo each other on the battlefield. However, not all of these disciplines are compatible. Their conflicting agendas can lead to ever more complex rivalries and acts of sabotage, both within Cormorra and without. Over the millennia, these loose allegiances have become tacitly recognized, if not strictly codified. A coven that includes specialists in different fields enjoys a greater degree of symbiosis within the Dark City at large. If the coven is visited by a Cormorite that wishes to become a scourge, he will be directed to a master of apotheosis without delay. If the supplicant wishes instead to take a great toll upon the lowly empires of man or all...
Oh, by the way, for those who don't know, sorry I forgot to mention this earlier, a scourge is a Dark Eldar who who has, well, either wings or those wing anti-grav jetpack things that similar to what swooping hawks use, but more to the point. And they tend to use heavy weaponry such as splinter cannons and dark lances, and have been known to be so prideful that they may say things such as, "The ground does not deserve to touch their feet."
Orc, he finds himself advised by a penumbral voyeur. In this way, the homunculi serve their collective needs to the best of their ability, preening their egos with grandiose titles whilst largely remaining out of each other's way. Nemesines. Among the most deadly of the disciplines practiced in the dark hearts of the Covens are those of the Nemesines, homunculi who seek the best way to kill every creature in the material universe and beyond. The Nemesines strive to uncover the death secrets of every sentient being, from the tiniest tyrannid eater organism to the most titanic void whale, and even the demons of the warp. If a life can be ended, a Coven Lord in the depths of the Dark City will know how to achieve the deed in the most efficacious fashion possible. Their hosts include a great many engines of pain and arcane artifacts, the better to visit murderous and efficient violence upon the foe. Such Nemesines, such as the homunculi of the Altered, broaden their chosen remit even further. They raid real space extensively, systematically exterminating entire species purely for the challenge. Others seek to bring an end to more abstract phenomena than simple life. These self-styled Illiniasts, or Ever-Nemesines, work to kill off ephemeral concepts such as hope or joy across entire sectors, erase progressive knowledge or enlightenment from the galaxy, or slay visionaries and great leaders in order to stifle inconvenient ideas before they occur.
Ah. So when someone said to them, "You can't kill an idea," their response was, "Hold my surgical tools."
Black Cornucopians. The discipline of the Black Cornucopian revolves around the concept that all of reality is theirs for the taking. The most acquisitive of all their kind, these expert plunderers are often the architects of the large-scale raids that mark the final years of the 41st millennium, sending out cells of Talos organ thieves on a constant rota of abduction. They have lately imitated the master homunculus Urian Rakath by stocking their pocket dimensions with enough victims to see them through centuries of isolation. Nadirists. The Nadirists embrace sin and corruption wholeheartedly, more so than even their brother Covens.
Oh, so they're going just full Slaanesh with this then, I assume.
For them, depravity is an aim in and of itself. Unlike their rivals, the Masters of Apotheosis, they seek to attain godhood not by the creation of malefic angels, but by passing through the nadir of experience to become the embodiment of evil. Should they bleed through darkness into the fabric of reality, they believe they will transcend the mortal plane altogether and become something far more sinister. Many modern nadirists begin their journey upon the downward spiral by following the footsteps of the Dark Muses, the folklore anti-heroes that populate Cormora's myths. The eldest of nadirists have become little more than withered geist things that must spend their lives immersed in atrocity lest they fade away altogether.
Oh yeah, didn't Vect name himself a Dark Muse after he was resurrected?
Are usually accompanied by active cross-parasite engines at all times. They look down upon even other homunculi as faint-hearted cowards, and have a bottomless hatred of the ascetic craft-world Eldar. Phoenix. The Phoenix are a hidden offshoot of the Ever-Nemesines. They seek to forge the Eldar race anew by the means of actively exterminating their own kind, be they Cormorite, Craftworlder, Harlequin, Corsair, or Exodite. They believe that should the Eldar become extinct, Inyad, the god of death, will be awakened, and the spiritual malaise of the Eldar lifted forever. The Phoenix is the most secretive of all brotherhoods, for their eagerness to see their brethren slain could easily see them undone. It is whispered that their morbid philosophy is not limited to Cormora. Some say that entire troops of maverick harlequins, and even the spiritual leaders of more than one craft world share the Phonix's goals. When the Eldar are ready to be reborn, the practitioners of this philosophy intend to be the ones in control, guiding their race's destiny from guttering spark to glorious inferno once more. Scarlet Epicureans. The Scarlet Epicureans are perhaps the closest.
You know, it also still confuses me that when that whole thing was happening, where, you know, like, with, what's his name again? And the Farseer of Ulthway. Oh yeah, Eldrad. When Eldrad was doing that ritual on that planet covered in crystallized Eldar souls to awaken Yad and stuff, and was unable to complete it because, Space Marines interfered because he had sent several groups to attack the Imperium as a diversion. Like, since he stopped the ritual to defend himself, it kind of makes me wonder, like, would that really have been necessary? Because when you think about it, if Eniad was supposed to resurrect all the Eldar, would it, like, as long as he finished the ritual, wouldn't it have not mattered if he got killed because he would have just come back anyway?
Closest spiritual descendants of those Eldar whose hedonism led to the birthing of Slaanesh. These Covenites and their devoted Dirac minions revel in every iota of sensation that they can wring from the universe. Some of these maniacal orgiasts attack the military forces of real space in order to invent unusual varieties of death, savouring the sublime moment when their lives are snuffed out. After drinking in their own last moments like a vintage draft, they will be regrown in the depths of Cormorra, ready to seek out an even more unusual and fascinating demise. All homunculi like to think themselves eternal, but in truth they are as capricious as the rest of their kind. One century may see a resurgence of apparitions, those homunculi that make their lairs in mirrors and delight in the capture of the vain. Another may see the arrogant Velethi, named for the dark muse Veleth, deign to accompany real space raids purely to demonstrate their own superiority. Repugnomancers, despite their lethal...
With a name like that, I imagine that the idea with Repugnomancers is to make something that looks just so horrifying that probably looks itself can kill.
Surprises, being seen as somewhat gauche by the eldest of homunculi, are enjoying a resurgence as the 41st millennium draws to a close. With the constant twists of fate that typify Covenite society, only one thing can be counted as fact. Whatever disciplines the homunculi are perfecting, it bodes ill for the rest of the galaxy. The Canvas Galactic. Though they forsook real space many millennia ago, all homunculi see the material dimension as theirs to do with as they wish. The realms of man, Orc, Tau and Necron are treated as little more than a combination of playgrounds, banqueting hall, and exhibition space.
Because if the entire galaxy is your canvas and you're but an artist, then everything is your playground.
No Covenite truly believes the empires of the lesser realms to be a threat. Even on those occasions when brutish orcs or foul-smelling space marines have clashed through the dimensional veil to invade the Dark City, the homunculi have watched with little more than detached interest, idly chatting amongst themselves about the finer points of their uninvited guests' anatomies. In truth, the homunculi and their minions are slain by the heroes, monsters and even common soldiers more often than they would like to admit. The sheer variety of deaths the species of the galaxy are able to visit upon their foes is part of their appeal to the Dark Eldar. For though Cormorra has mastered 1,000,000 types of murder, it always hungers for more. For a lowly Cabalite warrior to be killed in real space is a calamity. For the elder Covenites of that realm, however, it is a diverting pastime. Unless that homunculus's enemies directly conspire to prevent his resurrection, he will be back soon enough to wreak an inventive revenge. As the 41st millennium...
Also, the reason why maybe calamitous for a lowly Cabalite warrior is because they may not necessarily have the connections too easily.
Draws to a close. The homunculus are raiding space with
May not have the resource to easily afford a resurrection.
increasing frequency. They not only seek to line their nests with as many victims as they can catch, but also to paint their own bloody designs across the canvas of the stars. After all, what self-respecting Covenite would want to miss out on the end of all worlds?
Also, sorry about the many silent pauses and what I've been and the bits where I sound a bit off of just having very minor health issues.
End quote.
Well, that was fun to listen to.
There is so much more to be seen and discussed about the Dark Eldar, the Eladrithinius, as they call themselves. But I feel it best we end this here, as we have two other factions entire in the dark city of Cormorra, and of course, their king, Asdrubal Vecht, who I have already identified as possibly the most evil thing in Warhammer, matched only to Urian Rakath, who I have already performed an entry on. We shall save these topics for another day, and I look forward to seeing you then. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to the Covenants of Cormorra, the Homunculi. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notification button, as I would not want you to miss out. I wish all a very spooky Halloween, and hope that you can find the fun inside the fear. Now, no matter what you do today, or tonight even, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.
Well, I certainly enjoyed watching it. It was very informative, actually, about the different homunculi covens and the different disciplines that they study. And the my favorite part though was the story in the first part though, as is usually the case is with any of these lore videos that Baldermort makes. The stories he makes are just a treat. It honestly the kind of thing that you'd want to get a bucket of popcorn for. But I hope you guys have enjoyed watching with me, and if you did, I'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. If you should definitely go to the original video and subscribe to Baldermort, and show him some love. So you can really see the hard work he puts into these videos. But until next time, ta-ta!